Incoming right there.
All right, guys, this week we're going to talk about the best of the best low power variable optics. All right. I know it's taken me over 6 months to make this video. That's because I don't just regurgitate the talking points of, that are on the side of the box. I've been running these things through classes. I've been doing drills. I've been beating the snot out of this thing. So low power variable optics are the latest hotness. I know that they are. All right. My background, you guys know I have a sniper background. I was a Green Beret in the military, did 25 years. A lot of that time was in a special mission unit as that unit's master sniper. All right. So a lot of my time was behind scopes, actually supporting the assault force, day, night, all kinds of things. I was using low power variable optic scopes back in 2005, 2007, before they were cool. All right. That's just the truth. All right. So I have an opinion, but I have an educated opinion. So first off, why are you going to use a low power variable optic scope? And what I mean by that is you're setting up that gun, red dot scope versus putting a big scope on it, 3 to 9, 5 to 15, whatever. And then in the middle is that low power variable optic scope. So why would you choose one that's not as good as a red dot up close, not as good as a big scope at distance? Why would you choose a low power variable optic scope? And the reality is it acts as a 1x, all right, but it has the option to zoom in. Now, understand if you are going to run a low power variable optic scope, you're going to be keeping it on 1x 80% of the time. You're going to use it on 1x. And if that's not what you're going to do, if you say, well, I usually leave mine on 3x, then you really need to look at a scope that's like a 3 to 10 or 3 to 9, something like that, and stay away from the one if you're not going to use it, because there's a lot of advantages of having that larger objective lens on like a 3 to 9 or a 3 to 15 power scope. There are other advantages. So understand, if you're going to keep this thing 80% of the time on 1x, then low power variable optic scopes are a great choice for you. And understand it is hard to make a low power variable optic scope. It is, because you're trying to get enough light into this thing so that you can see clearly, but at the same time, you need to be able to bring this scope all the way down to a true 1x. It's got to be bright enough dot so that you can use it doing CQB even outside, urban movement, to get to the breach point. Once you're inside, okay, it's just another red dot, right? But then you've got to be able to throw the magnification on this thing if you're outside and you have those long range targets. It's not about engaging per se. I'm using the magnification to ID, is it a threat, is it not a threat? But if it is a threat, is it actually a threat that warrants deadly force? All right, so there's a lot that goes into low power variable optics. There really is. And so to do this test, I reached out to most of the major brands and I said, look, I'm going to do this video best of the best. All right, so I reached out to them. Hey, we're going to do this competition. Send what you want to represent your company. So I had Nightforce send a couple, Vortex sent a couple, Leupold said they wanted in, EOTech, Primary Arms, and then even Steiner at the last minute, they're like, hey, we want to get in on this. So one, I want to say I'm sorry if your favorite brand didn't make it. All right. I had to have a cutoff somewhere. I really did. Testing was done on 2 identical rifles. All right, I used a 1.5 inch riser on all of them. I used the same lot of ammo through the whole thing. CQB flat range drills, shooting out to 300 meters. Now, lots of mounting and zeroing the guns and then taking them off to do the next scope and then remounting and re-zeroing and remounting and re-zeroing. And I am having dreams about remounting and zeroing guns. That's how often I've done this, all right? I put a lot of time into each of these scopes. Those of you that have attended classes in late 23 and early 2024, you probably saw one of these scopes mounted on the guns that I was doing, that I was demonstrating all the drills with. That's not a tenth of it, all right? I have blown so much money on ammo through these things. I could get 1 million views. I'll never make it up, all right? I did this video for you guys. So again, first you got to ask yourself, why are you using a low power variable optic? All right, and then you can decide which categories matter to you more than somebody else, because some of the categories I'm going to cover are going to cover, they're going to be more important to you. Others are going to be less important. So you then weigh them, you make your own decision, right? Because why I'm using a gun is going to be different than yours. Right. First category I want to talk about for me personally is the focal planes, right? Because some of these are second focal plane, some of them are first focal plane. It makes a big deal, right? Snipers are going to want that first focal plane. Before I get into the focal planes though, I'm going to give a quick break. Guys, first category I want to talk about is focal plane. In other words, first focal plane versus second focal plane. What I mean by that, and one, if you're looking for a scope, this is something you should already have in your bag of tricks. You should understand what I'm talking about. First focal plane, the reticle basically stays the same aspect to the target. So when you're looking at it, if your ballistic reticle is this big on the target and you zoom in as the guy gets bigger, the reticle gets bigger also. Second focal plane, the reticle will always stay the same size, and then when you change magnification, the target, what you're seeing, gets bigger, but the reticle stays the same size. Why does that really matter? And there are pros and cons to each, right? The snipers are going to want first focal plane, and that's because they are using a ballistic reticle that, let's say it's got hash marks in it that are like 1 MOA or 1 mil apart. All right. As he changes magnification from 1x all the way up to, in this case, this is a 10x scope, he's going to obviously want those to stay the same aspect. If it's 1 MOA or 1 mil on 3x magnification, if I'm using that to hold for wins, I need it to still be 1 mil or 1 MOA if I have it up on 10x or 7x or whatever, because he's actually using it for ballistic holds, right? Now, so that's important for those snipers out there. The flip side of that, though, is a second focal plane reticle. The reticle is actually set further back inside the scope. And what that does is, for my CQB guys out there, if you're pieing around the edge of a vehicle or barricades or whatever, it's going to allow you to find that reticle, that red dot in the center of your scope faster, because your eye can be more offset. All right. So for CQB, if you're a CQB guy or you just want it for a truck gun, you might want to look at a second focal plane scope. It's going to be faster to find that dot. All right. The example is not that Vortex. This one right here. This is the Vortex 1 to 6x, and this is second focal plane. So when you look through it, the reticle doesn't change size. And this is just a Gen 2 scope. I specifically asked for Vortex to send this one because this was the scope that when the Green Berets ran the tests for low power variable optics, and this was a couple years ago, they did it out at range 37 on the backside of Fort Bragg, and this was actually the scope that was fastest on a lot of the CQB drills. And it's because it was second focal plane. It surprised a lot of people there. So anyways, this is not one of the newer scopes. It's not the one probably Vortex would have wanted to have sent, but I specifically asked for this one and basically used this one as the benchmark to measure the rest of these scopes. Spoiler alert for you, this scope is still one of the best scopes out here on the table right now. Great stuff. All right, so again, if it's just going to be your truck gun, okay, cool. All right, if you're going to use it as a designated marksman or just CQB, again, you might want to look at second focal plane versus first focal plane as being a category that's heavier for you. All right, guys, second category I want to look at is magnification, right? Because more is better. Yeah, maybe, but understand more is better, but that's at the expense of weight. All right, I got a Vortex and the EOTech here that are both 10x. All right, but these were some of the heaviest scopes that we have on the table, over 21 ounces. All right, now Leupold sent a 4.5x that weighed a little bit more than the 6x scope that they said. All right, but it was military tough. Right, but you understand, having magnification, great, but at the expense, sometimes it gets a little bit heavier. All right, so third category, let's talk about actual weight and length here. Heavy guns are slower. That's just the truth, right? Leupold had the lightest scope at 16.2 and 18 ounces. All right. Both of the primary arms scopes were right at 16.95 ounces. Nightforce had their smaller one that was 17 ounces, but everything else was 20 or 21 ounces. Now, that doesn't sound like much to you, but understand 5 ounces of difference. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot. That's until you have to carry it and fight with it, right? When you start looking at length of the scope mounted on the gun really only matters if you're going to be, let's say, mounting a night vision scope, like a thermal, on in front of that day optic to allow you to own the battlefield in the dark. Now the Nightforce NXX, this puppy right here, look how short that is. 8.7 inches, all right? That is a short scope. Now again, both the primary arm scopes, their second focal plane and first focal plane, just a little bit longer at 9.2. Everything else was over 10 inches long, all right? Me personally, lighter and shorter, because I'm one of those guys that actually likes to clip a thermal in front of it or a I2 Gen 3 clip-on scope on the front, especially hogs and deer that are rubbing on my fruit trees out in the backyard. All right. So some people may weigh size, weight, length a little bit different than others. All right. Here's a category a lot of people don't think about. Category 4 is ease of turning the magnification knob. What I mean by that is, right, you've got it on your gun, you should be able to just reach up and quickly adjust magnification, right? Should be easy to do. Run it from 1x, all right, and then turn it quickly over to whatever other magnification you want. Now, obviously you want it to be able to turn real easy. Yes and no. A good example of that is they're all smooth. I'll say that for all of them. Across the board, they're all smooth, right? But if it's harder to turn it, right, an easier one to turn, you're going to be able to break position less. So in other words, you're up on the gun, you're on target, you want to zoom in, you want to be able to just grab that knob and quickly turn it. All right. Now, having the ability to do that smoothly and easily may be more important to a lot of people. The flip side of that is you don't want a knob that just quickly, easily moves, because then you're worried about it. Well, it's on your kit, because you understand combat is 30 days of boredom for 30 seconds of excitement, and you never know when that 30 seconds is going to happen. Well, it's bumping on your kit or trees, the Humvee door, whatever. You don't want it to turn too easy, because it may go up to 3x, 4x, and then moment of truth, you've got to all of a sudden turn and present the firearm, and you're used to it being on 1x 80% of the time. Now all of a sudden it's on 3 or 4x, and that's not what you're used to having it on. It's going to catch you off guard. Why is this different? So the easiest to turn, again, I keep going back to the Nightforce, The Nightforce NX8, that's their small one, was the easiest to turn. And then also the Steiner. This is the T6XI, very, very awesome scope, smooth, easy to turn. Again, smooth, they're all smooth. All these scopes are top dollar scopes, guys. But the Steiner and the smaller Nightforce both turn very, very smooth and very, very easy. The hardest to turn was the big Nightforce. This is the ATAC R, all right? It is the stiffest to turn. If it didn't have a handle on it, I literally would have to grab the whole bell to turn this scope. Again, all of them do turn smooth though. This is just the stiffest. You're not gonna quickly throw it over to 8X, all right? Next category I want to talk about is brightness. Are they daytime bright? All right, as far as brightness goes, is it daytime bright? What I mean by that, and this is a big category for a lot of people, because again, 80% of the time we're using it on 1X, but we're using it as a red dot. So honestly, because most people only train on sunny days outside at the range, they go out, they want this scope to be just as bright as their red dot, their aim point, or the EOTech that they're used to running on the rest of their guns. One thing I will say, the Middle East desert was extremely bright. All right. Again, right off the, and some of these are daylight, daytime bright. They are. So the brightest was the Nightforce ATAC R. But also same brightness was both of the Vortex. All right, the second focal plane 1 to 6, but even their big monster, this is the Razor 1 to 10. This puppy's got that single dot in the middle, and it is very, very bright, very, very bright. All right, so those three were the brightest scopes that we had, but still in the very bright category was the Steiner, was very, very bright. The Nightforce, again, very, very bright. And not as bright as the larger Nightforce and the two Razors. All right. Fairly bright were basically both the EOTech ones. Now, and here's why I'm not really upset about the EOTechs being not as bright, because the EOTechs guys have got this massive donut of death inside of it. All right, when you look at the reticle on this thing, with it dialed all the way down on 1X, you've got your usual EOTech donut of death that everyone has grown familiar with. But as you run the dial up, as that donut gets so big, right before it hits the edge of the field of view, another one shows up in the middle that was just a little aiming dot before. And as you open that one up, so it's the same size, in the middle is a very, very small aiming dot. I had no problem at all, even on the brightest days, using any of the, either of the EOTech Voodoos. And again, understand bright single dots in the middle. Some of those other ones were brighter. That eats battery a little bit, but when you start having a larger illuminated reticle, that's eating a lot of battery life also, right? The dimmest of them, and it was still, it was not daylight bright, but I'll still say it was daylight visible, and that was the primary arms ones. That's not as bright as the other ones, but it's still, you can still see the reticle during the day. But if that's something that, a category that you want to get hung up on, you want it to be as bright as your red dot that you're running on your other guns, okay, then brightness might be something that is big for you. Brightness, I'm here to tell you, I don't get hung up on it, all right? If it's really bright outside, the reality is I don't turn it on. I don't. Again, I'll go back to the primary arms ones. I don't turn it don't turn the reticle on, the illuminated reticle on, because this has this particular one, the 1:8 first focal plane, it's got the Raptor reticle in it. That's a big black donut. And if it's really bright outside, there's no reason to turn it on. I'm bringing the black circle up onto the center of the target and I'm rolling through the trigger. So I don't get hung up on the brightness so much. I will say that having the bright red dot is a lot more similar to your single red dot, if that's what you guys are used to running. You're going to find it's going to be easier for your training to cross over. Category 6, battery life. All right, where to go with them? All of these scopes claim over 600 hours, and they will all tell you, that's at this brightness, which nobody would have it set on. All right, and it gets cut down. And again, the larger the reticle, the more it's going to eat it, the brighter setting you've got it on. They all have some form of auto shut off or shake awake. Okay, I'm not big on shake awake because if it's, let's say it's your truck gun, right? I keep a rifle in each one of my vehicles. That truck is always moving and bouncing, and that's always shaking it awake, right? But I could see where if it is your home defense gun, you can leave it at whatever brightness you want, and then when you go to snatch the gun up, it automatically goes to the brightness that you left it on, all right? That's a great feature, and again, almost all of these guns already have that, but I don't get hung up on actual battery life, and people would say, well, Carl, why not? Why isn't that important? And I'll tell you, because I mentioned I've carried these guns overseas. I also mentioned combat is 30 days of boredom for 30 seconds of excitement. I have never, not one time, brought a scope up with an illuminated reticle on it and not had a dead battery in it. What I mean by that is a lot of these scopes do not have locking Renostats on them, the knob that you turn. So for me, category 7, we're going to talk about locking Renostats. All right, guys, our 7th category, locking Renostats. All right, what I mean by that is the knob off to the side that turns on the illuminated reticle. You understand, if I have this mounted on my M4 rifle overseas, and I'm banging it on my kit, or I'm walking up and down the mountains in Afghanistan, every time this gun bounces, it turns the knob one click, one click, one click, and this knob is doing nothing but going around and around and around. And the battery's on, it's getting brighter, brighter, brighter. It goes to off, it goes to brighter, brighter, brighter. Sun up to sundown, and then the moment of truth, you go to bring it up, and you're now using the black reticle because the battery's dead. Check this out. This Vortex right here, push it in, it locks. No longer moves. No longer moves. We asked for this for decades, all right? Some of these scopes have got locking Renostats, others do not. And I understand for a lot of people, my 3-gun shooters out there, most people, they don't know that what they don't know. It's not important to them. But for me, a guy that has carried a rifle for a job, you understand my life relied on my equipment. So it is very, very important to me. All right. Again, the deployments 2005, 2007 that I carried low power variable optics, I don't know how many times I put batteries in them, and moment of truth, I'd get off the helicopter, whatever, I'd be back inside the wire, I'd go to check it, and sure enough, the battery's dead again. Leupold 3.5 to 10Xs on my SR25 Mark 11, same thing, the Renostats would get hung up on the kit, did not have a locking Renostats. I got to a point where I never used an illuminated reticle. Fast forward, one of the biggest selling points for a lot of you guys is you want that red dot. If that's what you want, one of the things I recommend you pick as high on your list is does it not have a locking Renostat. Now there are different kinds of locking and non-locking Renostats out here. Right off the bat, I will say the primary arms scopes, this is the second focal plane, but the first focal plane Raptor, neither one of these has a locking Renostat on it. I've mentioned it to them. I'm a big fan of their company, all right? Bright dot, but I have no doubt because I in general carry my rifles right-handed. It being bumped on my kit, it's gonna turn, it's gonna turn. So the Nova, bright dot in the middle, not gonna be there for me. But again, I mentioned that the Raptor with the big black donut of death, all right, okay, that might be able to help me. The Leupold-ish, kind of lock-ish, it's got a push button, all right? The knob does not turn, but it's push button. And what that does though is you hit it and it'll get dimmer. You hit it again, it'll get brighter. You can't like spin it to a setting or leave it one setting off from the last setting that you wanted it at. Also banging on your kit, that button is on the side where it's gonna hit. It's gonna turn on, it's gonna turn off, it's gonna turn on, gonna turn off, gonna turn on, gonna turn off. Not real big on it. All right, both the EOTechs, when I looked at the EOTechs, the Voodoos, again, the Renostat is on the left side of the gun, and but it's actually got 3 buttons, and because of the whatever type scope rings you're using, the on-off is on top, all right, and it'll whatever the last setting you left it on, turn it on, turn it off, all right. But then your brightness and dimming are actually recessed off on the sides. And what I found bang around, and I ran this all through a Battle Rifle 1 class. I've taken it through the woods, doing all kinds of drills, banging on my kit while I'm doing all these failure drills and transition drills and check drills. It never changed magnification, and that's both of the EOTechs. All right, I already mentioned the Vortex, but I want to point it out again because this is my favorite Renostat out of all of them. And the other companies that do not have locking Renostats, you need to understand I am not the only special ops guy that has this request of you. All right, to unlock it, you have to pull it out. All right, and a lot of these other companies have that on their elevation knobs. They already have locking knobs for elevation and windage. Why couldn't you have a locking Renostat? Right, so same thing, you pull the knob out, put it on the brightness that you want, all right, that's where I want, and between every illuminated spot is off, so you can go 1 click up or 1 click down to put it on off, all right. Get it the brightness you want it, and then push the knob in, and it's gonna lock. No matter how much it bangs on your kit, it's not gonna, I tried to get this thing to unlock, banging it, raking it on the tops of magazines, and I had no issues with it at all. The Nightforce ATAC R, guys, this scope, you can tell it is built to be Marine and Ranger proof. You're not gonna break this thing. This thing is overly built. I won't say overly, they're both, these are the 2 Nightforces. They're both 1 to 8x, but you can see how much more robust the ATAC R is. They obviously listened to a lot of things that US SOCOM were saying, and bomb-proof scope. Not only is it not locking, it is the smoothest, easiest Renostat to turn. I guarantee you that this puppy is going to come undone. Catch this, you see how it keeps slipping? The numbers actually stop moving. Watch, see that? That kit, right, it's bouncing on your kit like that. That knob, guys, is gonna come right off of it. It's gonna come right off. I love Nightforce scopes, big fan of them. I just think that, so honestly, I think it's going to be a deal breaker for a lot of guys out there for the Nightforce. Lots of great stuff about the Nightforce. The Renostat is definitely an Achilles heel. Last one I haven't really talked about yet is the Steiner. Steiner, same thing. It's got a Renostat that stops in both directions, but understand if you've got it set up at that one position where you want it to stay, you bumping it on your kit, it's turning, it's turning, it's turning. It will eventually stop when it gets to the other side, but then as you keep bumping it, it's again, the cap's going to come off on it. I really think, again, if I could give recommendations, constructive criticism to some of these companies, let's go with locking Renostats, guys. You've already doing locking turrets. Why would you not do a locking Renostat? All right, so category 8, let's do locking turrets, right? Why do you want locking turrets? Well, so that if somebody bumps your gun, they don't spin your elevation knob and throw the 0 off. All right. One thing I would say is all of them have got either locking turrets or they've got caps. And what I mean by that is most of the scopes have got caps that protect those elevation and windage knobs, all right? Or they've got actual locking turrets where let me find you one with a locking turret right here. The EOTech 10X, the Voodoo 10X, you have to actually lift up to unlock that elevation knob, and then you can turn it. The only one that didn't have that or caps was the smaller Voodoo, the 1 to 6. You see it's marked. The elevation knob is marked. So if you need to adjust it quickly on the fly, that's fine. But somebody's gonna bump that knob. There's no way to lock this one. And like the Leopolds actually have a push button on the back of it. You have to push button, make sure I'm not going off. This one actually has a 0 stop on it. So if you needed, okay, I need to add, I have the ballistic data for my gun. I need to add 5 more MOAs. I could push the button, spin it up to 5, let go of it, and I'm good. When I want to go back to 0, pushing the button, spin it back down to 0 in the dark, piece of cake. I like having protected elevation and windage knobs. I prefer caps. I understand how some people want to have the ability to dial if they're using a bullet drop compensator or something like that. But if you're going to do that, do it with a locking turret. All right. So enough on that. Maybe it's important to you, maybe it's not. Category 9, dead battery performance. All right, I mentioned running scopes on guns over in Iraq with dead batteries in them to the point where I did not trust the illuminated reticles at all. I just didn't do it. And what I mean by dead battery performance was I brought all of these scopes off and deliberately turned all the reticles off. All right, and what that leaves you with is basically the bare reticle. And on some of these scopes, for example, the Leupold has, the Leupold 1 to 4.5x has just basically stadia lines, what they call it the TMR reticle. And so now you're trying to do up drills with just very, very thin crosshairs. Okay. So I ran certain drills, basically went out, did some check drills, some targets in width and depth, and did it all, but I did it with all of the scopes set on, with the reticles turned off unilluminated, all right? And yeah, depending on the reticle, some worked very, very well and others didn't, all right? Best, without a doubt, with the reticles turned off were both of the EOTechs. I mentioned the Donut of Death. With it illuminated, it's very, very easy to find, but because that black circle is still there, it's also still very, very easy to find and run on targets. So the best, hands down, both of the EOTech Voodoo scopes. Still very good when turned off was the Steiner T6XI, which also has a donut in it, but also the primary arms with the Raptor. All right, the Voodoo, not the Voodoo, the Nova Reticle, the second focal plane. There's just not a lot of meat there for you to be using with it turned off. But the primary arms, first focal plane Raptor, and the Steiner T6X worked very, very well using the reticle at CQB distances with the reticle unilluminated. All right. Poor performance again, I'd have to say poorest would be the Leupold Mark IV HD, and that's, like I said, because it has the TMR reticle, which is great for long distance shooting, all right, for my designated marksman out there, but it's not good for CQB. But you understand a lot of that performing well unilluminated matters more on the reticle. All right, most of these scopes here, if you actually go to their websites, you can pick a simpler reticle versus one that would be better for ballistic shooting at distance. So you have options. All right, and that's going to bring us to our next category, reticle. All right, guys, category 10, we're going to talk about reticles right off the bat. Again, I'm going to run just straight down through them here. All right, the primary arms, and they're both 1 to 8, but the second focal plane, it's got what's called the Nova reticle. It's very, very simple reticle. It's got a little rangefinder thing down through the middle. You can do holdovers a little bit if you've got it zeroed the way they want you to. It's a decent reticle, very, very simple, and that allows them to only illuminate the center and make it very, very much like you running that aim point or that a lot of people are used to on their red dot sights. Second one is basically the same scope, but first focal plane, primary arms 1 to 8, but this has the Raptor M8 reticle in it. What it's got is, it's got a super, super sexy reticle in it. It's got my big red donut of death. But you'll see looking at it, it's actually got rows of dots coming down to the side, and those are wind holes at different distances. The guy that designed the reticle is called the ACSS, Advanced Combat Sighting System. Dimitri put a lot of work into designing this reticle. I've given him a lot of constructive criticism for it, and a lot of accolades also. If you are not a designated marksman, but you still grasp the concept and you understand how to range estimate the width of somebody's shoulders or use the vertical rangefinder, you're going from his waist to the top of his head, this reticle is great for crushing targets out to 600 yards easy. And that includes using the wind dots at different distances. So one of the best reticles, and if you want to learn more about it, we've got a whole separate video in our video archive talking about that reticle. I don't put it on my guns. I don't. The one that I prefer is very, very similar, but instead of being called the Raptor, it's called the Griffin, and it has a mil grid in it, mil radians, and that allows me to use the ballistic software off of my phone, and it allows me to be a little bit more accurate. It doesn't matter what kind of ammo, what kind of guns. I prefer the Griffin reticle. But again, the one that Primary Arms sent for this test was the Raptor. Next scope going down the line is the Leupold Mark IV. It is what I've mentioned it before. It's the TMR reticle. It's regular stadia lines that are marked for mils. So if you grew up a Marine or Army sniper or law enforcement sniper and you're already used to using the TMR reticle, this might be the reticle that you're looking for. All right, it might be. All right, might be indeed. Next one is the Voodoo 1 to 6 made by EOTech. It has what's called the SR3 reticle. It's got the donut of death, and then it has small holdover marks for different distances. this scope is designed to be used just as you're running you're running it as a CQB gun. You're going to be using that point blank zero out to 200, maybe 250, 300. I don't get hung up on those other hash marks, but here's the cool part is those are not illuminated, so they're not distracting at all. But again, that particular reticle, not the reticle I would point a designated marksman to, but if you're a gunfighter, you're looking for a CQB optic, or maybe a truck gun, the SR3 is a good optic. I get into the razors, all right? And the first one, again, is the second focal plane Gen 2E, the Razor HD. This one has the VMR2 reticle in it. And it's a simple reticle that is, it's marked with mils, so if you had to give corrections and stuff, you could do it, but not a lot of data underneath it. It's a nice, clean reticle, second focal plane, bright dot, designed for guys doing CQB, urban movement, but you still have the ability to use holdovers, but holdovers are a second thought for that one. All right. Next one though is the big Razor HD Gen 3 1 to 10, 10x magnification with this one. Now they went with the EBR9 with his MRAD reticle, and it has got that. Remember earlier I mentioned that mil grid below it. It has got that mil grid. So if you are that designated marksman on your team and you're looking at, hey, I still want low power, so when I go in the house with the assault force, but I still want that mil grid, so if I had to go to the roof to provide outer cordon security while they're doing sensitive site exploitation, this scope right here has got that mil grid in it, so I really, really like that. All right, yeah, decent stuff indeed. Next one, let's go to that big EOTech. EOTech has their own 1 to 10x. This is the Voodoo 1 to 10. It's got the SR4 reticle in it. Now the SR4, same thing, you've got the big donut of death, you zoom in, you get the little donut of death in the middle, but it's got a straight line down the middle that is actually marked in minutes of angle. It has a minutes of angle scale in it. So if you're, whatever type of gun you've got this mounted on, especially those guys that are running like subsonics on a 300 blackout or something like that, you know your distance, you know what your holdovers need to be. You can tweak this to whatever load it is that you're shooting. They have other reticles available. If you're an MRAD guy, again, there are other choices. The one that EOTech sent me has minutes of angle scale. It's very, very clean, and it's a decent reticle. Really is a decent reticle. All right, let's get up to Nightforce. ATAC-R, the 1.8. This is that bomb-proof one made for the military. It's got the FC DMX reticle in it. I'm don't know what DMX stands for, but I guarantee you it involves designated marksman, right? It has got a good, clean mil grids off to the sides for measure. It's marked in mils so that you can talk another shooter onto a target, giving corrections, and you've got that mil grid for both windage holds, holds for moving targets, holds for elevation, a good reticle for designated marksman. Very cluttered in the bottom for somebody that's just looking for a truck gun. If you're just looking for a truck gun, you might want to stay away from the designated marksman reticles. All right, now the other Nightforce, the NX8, smaller, same magnification, right? But it has the exact same reticle in it, the FC DMX, exact same grid. Now, one of the reticles I did like was the Steiner T6XI. Again, it's only a 1 to 6 scope, but it's got what they call their KC1 mil reticle. It's basically just stadia lines, but it does have the donut of death in the middle. What I like going in very, very close is actually illuminated not just the center lines. They actually illuminated a little bit of the circle around it with just the stadia lines in the middle. What that does is when you're on a lower magnification, it gives you a larger dot to see. It's catching more light, all right? But when you zoom in, especially around dusk, and I'll talk about Dusk I.D. as another category, being able to see right when the sun's going down, important on the battlefield, but also for hunters. I liked how the center of this reticle illuminated, but it was very, very clean in the middle. Again, that's the Steiner KC1 mil reticle. All right, last scope on our list is the Leupold Patrol. Now, this is their 6HD. It's a 1:6. And it has what's called the CMR2 reticle. It's basically just a simple dot in the middle. It's got little stadia lines off to the side. And then it is marked down 4, 6, 8. I think you can go out to 900 on it. Illuminated little circle in the middle. To me, it looks like they're wanting to keep it as clean as possible so that law enforcement officer, whatever, if he had to grab that truck gun, that patrol rifle out of the trunk, he had holdovers if needed, but they're more like an afterthought. If you are looking at one of the Leopolds, but you're wanting to shoot at extended distances, you're going to want to go with the TMR reticle. But again, all of these companies offer different choices in reticles. I like that these companies for the most part, sent me different options in reticles to show what they've got. And I encourage anybody that's looking at buying any scope, don't just pick up the one in the gun store. Okay, cool, see it there, but look online and see what all the little parts of those different reticles do, because some of them have got a lot of little selling points, all right? Category 11 is clarity, all right? You can go get a cheap scope off of Amazon made out of Chinesium or something made in Ukraine and understand it's gonna look sexy, but at dusk or dawn, you're out there trying to take that shot at that deer, you're gonna have a hard time seeing that animal. So for me, I don't mind spending a little extra money to get good glass, right? So 11, clarity. This is an important category to me personally. Might not be for you, but for me, this is a very, very important category. Right out of the gate, let me just say all of them are great. They're all very, very clear. Now, these are all top of the line scopes, and I would expect nothing less from any of these companies, right? But somebody's got to be better, somebody's got to be worse, right? So best clarity-wise was the Leupold Mark IV HD. All right, now it only goes 1 to 4.5x. That might have played with it a little bit, but setting it at they're looking through, scanning, everything else. This is the clearest glass was the Leupold. Now, you gotta have a best. That means we should also have a worst. Swing all the way to and again, these are all great glass, great clarity, but at the other end was the other Leupold, the Patrol 6 HD. Now, in Leupold's defense, why was this not as clear? And the reason why, and when I did the test for clarity and a couple of the other tests, as I'm filming them and looking through them for clarity, there's a spot of fog right in the center of the rear lens. Now, I'm like, what happened? That wasn't there before. And when I bring it back in the bin, like I look through it right now, it's not here. Completely clear right now. But when I had it outside, it's there. Bring it back inside, it's not there. What is that? That's, guys, that's condensation. That's something inside. So the gas this scope has been compromised. In Leupold's defense, and I'm getting ready to talk about it here in a minute, another test that I did an extreme temperature shift test on these, very extreme, more extreme than you guys will ever do. So extreme, I'm sure it would violate everybody's warranty, but I honestly think I damaged this scope. Now, like I just mentioned, I've brought it back outside, depends what the temperature is. It's was very, very high 90s when I was trying to do the clarity test. Right now, there's no foggy spot in the middle of this. It's crystal clear, all right? But I believe I damaged this Leupold, all right? So they're at the bottom of the list for that. That brought us to our next test, guys, Dusk I.D. Category 12, guys, is Dusk I.D. And what I mean by that is the ability to identify and aim at a target that's, and one that I use is 250 meters away. What I did was in a bright white metal silhouette out at 250 meters, and I lined all these scopes up to see when you could identify, when you couldn't. And where that comes from my deer hunters or elk hunters out there, you've gotten in that tree stand and season opens at 6:22 in the morning, 6:22 hits, you bring up that deer rifle and you can't see through your scope, or you can see through your scope. A lot of times where that varies is the quality of the glass and how large that objective lens is. Larger that objective lens, the more light is transmitted through it. They use the slang term gathered. Larger objective lens gathers more light. It transmits it, but it has a larger surface. One of the issues with a low power variable optic is you notice they do not have belled objective lenses. These all have very small objective lenses on them. So again, it's going to come down to quality of the glass, but also the reticles being, some reticles work better very, very dim, right? So how do I make it consistent for all of them? Because some of them go all the way up to 10x, and some of them, for example, the Leupold only goes up to, it's a 1 to 4.5x. So obviously it's dialed all the way up on 10x. It was very, very hard to ID the targets. Things look dimmer, right? But as you dial the magnification down, it gets brighter again, all right? So to make it fair across the board, I set all of the scopes on 4.5x. So the Leupold didn't have any advantage over the other ones. They were all ran at that lower magnification, all right? And one thing I will say, and I was surprised by this, was the best for night ID, right at dusk, best Dusk ID was the EOTech 1 to 6. Again, it had that donut of death in it, but at 1.4x, 1.45, it allowed me to, with the reticle turned on, dimmed, but with the reticle turned off, it was, there's just something about that donut of death that's very, very efficient. It really is for finding the target. The other one that was just as clear though was the Vortex 1 to 10. Now that surprised me a lot because 10x, I couldn't see the targets, but as soon as I dialed it down to 4.5x, it became one of the clearest reticles to see. And remember, this one has got that mill grid in it that allowed that designated marksman to use that data in his gun even right at dawn and dusk. So those were our best performers. Other great performers were the Primary Arms Nova and the Raptor, all right, both of them. They're basically the exact same scopes. They're both 1 to 8s. The Nova just has the reticle second focal plane as opposed to the Raptor being first focal plane. These two both performed very, very well, as did the Leupold Mark IV and the EOTech 1 to 10. Again, the EOTech's got that, the donut of death. The Leupold Mark IV has that TMR reticle that, and again, it's designed to be ran at 4.5x. This scope was basically built for being set right there. So they both worked great. Again, there's very little difference between all these guys. I kept going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This one's, and I'm moving them back and forth on the table. Now, I didn't do this, guys. Okay, that would make me a Marine or a Navy guy, right? But looking through this one, they're all, again, great glass, right? The best, the greatest, I had good. I had a couple that were just good. All right, and that was right off the bat, the Vortex 1 to 6, the Steiner, which is also a 1 to 6, and they were good. They were good for being able to see the targets. And then the smaller Nightforce that had, again, it's got that Milrad reticle, and it's great reticle. The reticle worked good in the dark. But it's just not quite as clear as the larger Nightforce was. And again, I had the one scope that performed poorly, and that was that Leupold Patrol 6 HD. But again, guys, it was because of the cloudy spot right in the middle of the rear lens. If I offset my eye around the sides, it would go back bright again. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm not going to lie and say that I didn't have a scope fail in this thing. And that was this Leupold one right here. All right, so how did I have a scope fail? Carl, how do you break scopes that are over $1,000? That's going to bring us to our next category, the thermal drift test. Category 13, thermal drift, or as we call the freezer and the oven drill. All right, what is thermal drift? Mid-2000s, EOTech got bad rap because there were law enforcement officers in Texas that would zero their EOTech on their gun. It'd be perfect. They'd put it in the trunk of their cruiser, and then when they'd go to pull it out somewhere, the zero would be off. Why? Well, because it's Texas. You understand that trunk of that car is like 160, 180 degrees. You bring it out, now the reticle, the optic, the gun, the ammo, everything is 160, 180 degrees, all right? That difference, now if you just went to confirm zero, it would be off, but if you let the gun sit, come back to room temperature, the zero would go back again. So anyways, EOTech got a bad rep for that, but what they found though is if you go out and do everybody else's optics also, aim points, everybody else's, all of them have varying amounts of thermal drift, all right? So whenever you get to a new area, guys, like as soon as we flew in Afghanistan, as soon as we flew in Iraq, wherever, we would immediately confirm zero on the guns, right? Changes in elevation above sea level, changes in temperatures, whatever, and try to take care of your guns, right? Okay, but you understand they don't have a choice putting it in the trunk of their cars. These vehicles get hot. So optics have got to be able to handle extreme temperatures. Let's go to the flip end of that. I spent 25 years in the military, most of that as a Green Beret, but prior to Desert Storm, I was in a scout sniper team, recon platoon, and I'd be out in these hide sites, and I've done Arctic training in Alaska and cold weather training, Camp McCoy, Wisconsin, all varying places. I remember specifically freezing rain coming down in the hide site. You're in a mummy sleeping bag just trying not to die, and waking up the next morning and actually having my M16A2 frozen to the ground and literally whacking it. And at one time I remember using my E-tool to pry and break my M16 out of the ice in my little hide site freezing. Rain comes in, you don't have a choice. It's too late to move. It wasn't raining and freezing when we first got into that little bush. It is what it is. I was young and stupid back then. But the more I thought about it, those iron sights and the gun have to be able to handle it. Okay, so if I had optics on the gun back then, I would have to have optics that could handle that. All right. Fast forward to being behind the M21 sniper rifle that had a Art 1 or Art 2 scope on it. Later on in my career, behind the M24 sniper rifle with the Leupold M3 Alpha on it. Many times being out in the freezing rain and having to actually stop and get ice off the lenses. Right, so I have shot with ice built up on scopes. I've had to break ice off of optics. My Leupold, the old Mark 1s, the old M3 Alpha Ultra scopes with the mil-dot reticles, those scopes never ever let me down. You could break the ice off of them, they'd hold the zero. So how do I test these scopes without, how do I test for thermal drift? But I also want to include a freezer, and I want to include it coming out of extreme heat temperatures. So we came up with a test, and I've done it on other scope reviews before, so don't bitch that I'm picking on your particular brand of scope unfairly. I've been doing this test for years. Matter of fact, the old Raptor review I did on a 1-to-8, that was one of the first ones that I broke out of a complete block of ice. So how I would run this is I would take your optic, right? In this case, my EOTech Voodoo 1-to-10, mount it on the gun. And what I did was I have special targets printed up, guys. And I'd take that target, one right off the top, first scope right here. They're all in order. And you'll notice there are 3, all right? There are 3 bullseyes. I'd mount the scope, torque it down correctly with my fat wrench, and then I would do a 5-shot zero. It doesn't really matter if it was a little bit left, right, high, or low, because that is my base control zero. I would do 2 guns at a time, 2 optics mounted at a time, because I have 2 identical rifles, one behind me here and this one right here. Both 13.7-inch guns. All the scopes have the same height risers, same lot of ammo, everything. No advantage over one gun versus the other. I then take them to the deep freezer in the back of the shed, right there within 100 meters of the range. And I'd put them into pans, pour the water in, and I'd let that shit freeze overnight. Solid block, all right? I then grab my cameraman, happens to be my son, poor kid lives next door. Hey, let's go do the next 2 guns. We'd go out, flip the lights on, pull the first gun out, take the medical ice removal tool, right? Medical ice removal, claw hammer, right? I'd take the claw hammer, break the ice off of it, and then go down to the range, load it up, and fire this shot group right here. Then we'd go back up to the top of the hill, we'd get the next gun, and we would do the second gun the same way on a separate target. Both guns back to room temperature, and then we would put them, just the upper receiver, we'd put the upper receiver of the gun in the oven set at 160 degrees, nada. That's the trunk of a cop car in Texas. What about my other guys that are somewhere hotter? I don't know, Djibouti, Africa, I don't know. I actually typed 220 degrees on here, but when me and Nick started with the first rifle, I accidentally set the oven to 250. So to make it fair for everybody, we did it all the guns at 250 degrees. Now, and that's why I'm glad I run Surefire lights and cables and everything, because I didn't have to worry about my Surefire lights dying, because they can easily handle 250. How did the scopes do, right? We'd come back late that afternoon. We've gotten them up to temperature. We'd use the oven mitts, we'd pull them out. Go down to the range, still using the oven mitts. Put it on the lower receiver, put my cheek on the lower receiver that hasn't been in the oven, load it up, and then I would fire that next shot group. And what we're looking for is there any from zero, all right? Is there any shift at getting cold, all right? Notice this shot group is slightly left of center, all right? The one with the optic completely covered with condensation, I can barely see through it, still slightly left of center, maybe a little bit lower, but not much. And then after coming out of the oven where I shot the third shot group, it's still left of center, but notice from the control zero that it does have slight thermal drift. It really does. So again, this particular target is from the primary arms Nova scope. All right, some of them had more shift than others. I'm gonna just scroll through them real quick. All right, again, same type thing. The primary arms scope with the Raptor, again, it's pretty much the same scope, but notice it did have thermal drift that went low again with this scope. All right, was not surprised to see it the same at all. All right, the next one was my Leupold. All right, this is their HD, good center shot group, condensation on the lens in the middle one, but there really wasn't much shift at all. A little bit sloppier shot group. That might be the shooter. Okay, the Leupold performed very, very well. All right, let's bring up my first Voodoo 1 to 6. All right, my control zero off here on the side. There's actually 5 shots there, guys, even though you can only see 4. Putting it in the freezer, the shot group, it rose just a little bit, not a lot of bit, but all the shot groups are, again, just left of center. But if you go from 0 to the extreme temperature, 250 degrees, there is a little bit of thermal drop in this scope, it getting hotter. I'm assuming it's from the springs, metal expanding. That's going to raise that reticle inside of the gun, which in turn is going to lower the barrel ever so slightly. So a little bit of shift on that one. All right, my controlled second focal plane scope that I asked for from Vortex. All right, initial 0, very little shift at all with the Vortex. I'm very, very pleasantly surprised with how the Vortex second focal plane scope did. How about that big ass Vortex, the 1 to 10x? I know initial 0, I strung it high and low, not really sure why. All right, I'm gonna say that was user error. Again, 0 slightly left of center. You look after it being in the oven, after being in the freezer, I actually tightened it up. I was surprised at how well I could see through this scope on 10x. And it's basically because the beads of condensation on the lens, I don't know, maybe I was looking between 2 beads or what, but it was actually very easy to see through this one, even after the big even after me just breaking the ice off of the lens. Thermal shift at all, again, none, or very, very little with the Vortex. All right, let's go back to the big EOTech. The big EOTech, again, this is the Voodoo 1 to 10. My 0 was a little bit low on the initial target. Coming out of the freezer, it did raise the 0 a little bit. But then coming out of the oven, again, the 0 is basically back to where it was without being hot at all. And I'm here to tell you guys, it hurt my hands to dial magnification on these guns. These guns were hot. It was hot to grab the charging handle to put the round in the chamber. These guns were hot. I'm not faking it here. I beat on these guns rough. So again, happy with them. The Nightforce, right? This is the bomb-proof Nightforce ATAC. ATAC-R, initial 0. The freezing temperatures did not bother it at all. However, going into the oven, coming out of the oven did drop the 0 on the Nightforce ATAC-R. Okay, I was not expecting to see that. All right, let's go to the other Nightforce, the smaller one. Again, it's still 1 to 8x. All right, initial 0, okay, strings high and low. Again, guys, I'm a human being, and could I have sandbagged it in better and given you guys a little more accurate zeros? I could have, but how about just let Carl shoot it like I'm going to actually be shooting the gun for real and let you guys see it. So I string off 5 rounds and then I move to the next gun, right? Very little shift with the temperature as far as freezing, but again, you can see that there was a drop when it came out of the oven, thermal drift. Let's go back to Steiner. All right, the Steiner 1 to 6, guys. Again, I love that little donut of death in the middle. So zeroing it, remember, because it's a circle, so putting circles inside of circles made for a little tighter 0. But I want you to look at, and again, don't get hung up on the middle one, the freezing. Those shot groups always loosen up because there's just so much condensation quickly building up on the lenses. I have to keep wiping them off. But I want you to see that there was thermal shift, but it was in the opposite direction. That surprised me also when I pulled this one out of the oven. So the Steiner did have thermal drift. Last but not least, guys, was the Leupold 1 to 6. Again, it's second focal plane scope, but this is their patrol scope. This is the one that, you know, I'm assuming is geared towards law enforcement guys. Guys, there's very, very little shift. Maybe just a little bit down, not that much shift. I was very, very happy with how this scope performed. And there's a little bit of condensation on the lens. There's no condensation at all after it came out of the oven. The problem, though, was I brought them all back down to room temperature, and they all went back up on the shelf again as I started doing all these other drills. And that's when that spot of condensation on the inside of this scope showed up. Rough test. So even though it did not shift the 0 so much inside this Leupold, I can honestly say, Leupold, I know I voided your warranty. For all you guys out there, please, please, please do not do this to your scopes just because Carl said it was okay. It's not okay. All right, it is better for me to beat on this stuff and have something fail here than for you guys to have your stuff fail at the moment of truth when you're that law enforcement officer responding to protect somebody's family, or you're a military guy overseas working with your team, or you're that concerned citizen protecting his family. That is not the time for your equipment to be failing. All right, so anyways, that was a big test for me to do. It took quite a few days and a lot of ammo to do, guys. Hey guys, just to update, Leupold replaced this Patrol HD scope, no questions asked. All right, I need some more coffee and then we'll do the next chapter. Remember how I talked about low power variable optics are designed to be used 80% of the time on 1x, but then it gives you the option that if you've got those long range targets, you then spin that dial up, so then you have magnification for engaging targets at further distances. Okay, right? That's the whole reason for running a low power variable optic as opposed to just running a red dot. So let's do the next category for shooting at those distances. So category 14 is what I call the 50-300 drill. It's one of the drills that I do in our battle rifle courses. And what I have is steel plates. They are half torsos, there's 6 of them, and they are set from 50 to 300 meters. All right, there's 6 target. So just from the shoulders up to represent a enemy combatant that is gone prone on the battlefield to your front. So now they're painted green. So not only do you have to be able to hit them correctly, first you've got to be able to find them, right? And I just run them on both sides of the road. You roughly know where they're at, right? So to do that with each one of these guns, each one of these optics rather, again, I had my 2 rifles out there, but for the most part, I took that one rifle and I would mount the first optic. I had my paper target there at the set distance. And what I set these guns up for was what we call point blank zero, all right? So I would zero it, make sure the scope was dead on, nuts right where it needed to be, all right? And then once it was ready, I would start, this was a timed event, prone unsupported. Now I would, when you shoot unsupported, you're allowed to rest the magazine, 28 round magazine on the ground. But from there, that's it. You're not sandbagged in, you're not using bipods, not use anything. You're using what you would be using on your regular work gun, right? That regular work gun with the optic on it. And let's see how those guns perform. Now I mentioned point blank zero. For those of you not familiar with point blank zero, basically what it is for a 5.56 gun, all right, if you zero at 200 meters, the bullet does not rise more than 5 inches at max ordnance to hit that 200 meter target. And what that does is, if this is your target, headshots on the modern battlefield, the bullet does not raise more than 5 inches and then drops back in the 200 meters to cross line of sight again. And then it doesn't drop more than 5 inches out to about 220, 230 meters, again, depending on the length of your barrel, weight of your bullet, muzzle velocity, all that stuff, height over bore of your optic. All these scopes have the same risers on them. Everything should be consistent. I use the same lot of ammo for this, all right? I would shoot it timed with the pro timer I started on a 50-meter target and worked my way out. And all these scopes are a joy. They're all a joy to shoot. One thing I will say is, right out of the bat, there's only a 9-second spread from the fastest scope to the slowest scope. All right, so all of these scopes, they all did good. All right, fastest scope without a doubt was the EOTech 1-10, all right, with a time of 40 seconds. 40 seconds shooting 10 targets. I know my 3-gun guys out there, my guys that shoot competitively, I know you guys would knock all 6 of those targets in 10 seconds flat. Yes, Carl Ericsson's a terrible shot. I got that. I can live with that. I shot them, and this is what my times were. All right. Fastest scope was 40 seconds. All right. Tied for second place was the other 10X, the Vortex, and the Primary Arms Raptor. They both had 42 seconds. All right. But for the rest of them, again, everything was within 9 seconds. All right. As a control measure, I ran a red dot scope with no magnification at all, and as a control, no magnification at all, and it was still inside my 9-second window there. So don't think that you guys are all that awesome with your magnification. So why use magnification at all? Because you understand it doesn't make you any more accurate per se. All right, you can shoot these with iron sights and still get hits out to 300 no problem. What it does, what magnification gives you is the ability to see the target better. Smaller point of aim maybe, yes, but more important, having that magnification allows you to find that target. It allows you to ID, is it a threat, is it not a threat, is it a threat that actually warrants deadly force? These are all nice green half torso targets. Yeah, shoot them as fast as you can, Carl. So again, I want to say I used a point blank zero, and basically what that means was I just put that center right in the middle of the target, and I'm going to hit basically point aim, point impact at the 50-meter target. The 100-meter target, I'm going to hit a little bit higher. The 150-meter target, I'm going to hit a little bit higher, all right? The 200-meter target, I'm back down in the middle again, all right? And the 250-meter target, I'm a little bit low on the target. And then the 300-meter target, I know what my holdover is for my guns at 300, 350, 400. I just use a point blank zero out to those distances. The reason why I mention that is many of these scopes have got the ballistic reticles in them, the mill grids, or that the EOTech that had the minute of angle grid in it, the Nightforce scopes and the Vortexes that have got the mill radian grids in it, the primary arms that has that Raptor reticle in it, it's a BDC grid. Now, if you're going to be shooting at longer distances, some of these you could easily get shots out to 800, depending on the gun you mounted it on with the correct ammo and everything. But again, for that, you'd have to have the correct weight ammo. Some of these are set up for 77 grain Sierra Match King, the Black Hills ammo, the Mark 262 ammo. Some of them, they want you to use different types of ammo. I ran the same weight ammo through all these guns, and I just shot a point blank zero. All right. Now, I mentioned the primary arms Raptor because it is an awesome reticle BDC that if you zero according to how they recommend it, you've got holdovers out to 600 and it's good to go. It's fine. But what I have found is, me personally, on a low power variable optic, if I'm a CQB guy or this is just a truck gun, I'm doing point blank. I'm going to use my point blank zero just like I do on my micro prisms and my red dots and my EOTechs. I'm going to just trust my point blank zero because then I don't have to estimate range to the target. I just don't have to do it. All right. So my reason for saying that is if you want to get a scope with a mill reticle in it, they're great. And that's what I recommend for snipers and designated marksmen that are going to actually take advantage of the ballistic data that they have. However, I did this test for you guys the way that I would use these guns. And for me, unless I've got that mission where I'm going to be the designated marksman, in which case I'm probably going to go with a larger scope than a low power variable optic. I chose to zero all the guns using a 200 meter point blank zero. And that's just what I ran. And that's because that's what I teach in our battle rifle courses. And that's what I believe most shooters are going to do. All right. So again, I recommend you choose the reticle for your needs. All right. If you're just a CQB guy, you're going to go out to 300. Look at one thing. If you're a marksman, you're going to go, you're going to use this out to 500 or 600 meters. You're going to, I recommend you go with a different reticle that actually reflects how you're going to use it. Category 15, warranty. Why? Because some of us are rough on our stuff. Now, whether you're a military guy that's accidentally getting it slammed in the car door of the up-armored Humvee that's got a 600-pound door, or maybe you're tripping coming off the tailgate of the helicopter and you face plant in the 10-foot tall elephant grass. Maybe you're a SEAL locking out of a sub from 40 feet down. All right. I don't know. I know some people are rougher on their guns than others, and I know not all gun and optic companies have good warranties. What I will say though is this video is called Best of the Best. All of these companies here, guys, all of them, all of these brands have lifetime warranties. A lot of them are no questions asked. Just send it in. Send it in. You're good. No, we don't care how you did it. All right. These are all good scope companies and lifetime warranties, no questions asked. All right. So that brings us to category 16, price point. Because you understand, I've got to send a couple of these optics back. I do. I've had a lot of them given to the channel, okay? There's a couple that I wanted included in this, and I wasn't getting feedback, so I actually purchased the scope myself. So you understand, I feel your pain sometimes, guys, I do. Manufacturer suggested retail prices. Can you get it cheaper a little bit off of Amazon or Optics Planet? Yeah, okay. Or if you've got a connection at the company, cool. It is what it is. But you're gonna love some of these prices. Guys, the Vortex Razor 1 to 10, this is the top of the charts right here. $4,000 for this scope, MSRP. I want that to sink in. That is twice the price of the EOTech 1 to 10. All right, twice the price of the EOTech 1 to 10. Now, this Vortex is an awesome scope. All the Razor scopes are good. The Razor HD 1 to 10 is awesome. If you've got deep pockets and $4 grand doesn't matter to you, and that's again. All right, a next high price one was that big Nightforce, the ATAC R. It's 1 to 8X scope. It's bomb proof. You can tell this puppy was built for harsh use in the military. $2,900. All right, it's pricey. It is. All right. All the rest of the scopes, though, everything else was under $2,000. All right. As a matter of fact, the Leupold Mark IV HD, the 1 to 4.5X, was only $1,000. All right. So again, doesn't sound like it's a lot of money. $1,000 is a lot of money to me, guys. It is. $1,000 is a lot of money to a lot of you guys out there. Could I do another video, best of the best low power variable optics under $1,000? I could, but for this one, I wanted, hey, put your money where your mouth is. Show me the best that you guys got. Let's pull out the best. Let's pull out the latest hotness. And so anyways, $1,000 to $4,000. There's a lot of glass on this table here, guys. So for some of you, that category doesn't matter. For others, that's going to weigh into your decision-making process. I'm not saying any of them are not worth the price at all. I'm not saying that any of them justify the extra cost. I'm putting it out there what the prices were, all right? Okay, so that's all of my separate categories that I have for you, all right? I know this has been a long video. I appreciate you guys skipping chapters and jumping forward just like I always do when I watch things like this. We tried to mark it out the best that we could. I tried to treat this objectively. What I want to leave you all with is I've got a few notes about each one of these scopes that I want to share with you. But one, I don't want you to bitch that, well, you know, Carl, you only talked about my scope for 25 seconds, but you talked about this other scope for 90 seconds. You understand, I just did verbal diarrhea for an hour and a half about all of them, and I'm not wanting to regurgitate everything the same. But for those of you that want to jump forward just to the summary at the end, I've got a few notes about all of these. I'm going to run through them as quick as I can, guys. All right, the primary arms, this is their Platinum Series 1 to X with the second focal plane scope. Again, it's got the Nova reticle in it. Second focal plane is a lot faster for those guys that are just using it as a truck gun. You're shooting around barricades, around vehicles, whatever. This might be what you want, all right? It's a bright, simple reticle, very, very clean. So you're just seeing that dot. It's got auto on, off and everything, but that's what the rest of these have. Pros and cons, I've already beat to death in the rest of these, rest of the video earlier. That brings it to its big brother here, exact same magnification, 1 to 8. This is the Platinum Series with the Raptor reticle, first focal plane made by Primary Arms. All right, the biggest selling point for this thing is that Raptor reticle and it being first focal plane. So it maintains that aspect ratio. It is not daylight bright, but it is daylight visible. All right, the Raptor donut to death, very, very fast on low power. And if you master the reticle, the Raptor reticle, the ACSS reticle is very, very accurate, including the wind dots work very, very good. It allows you to estimate range, holds for winds, all right? But me personally, as a sniper, I would have preferred that they had sent me their Griffin reticle. Very, very similar reticle. It just has the mill grid that I want. But for the average Joe, the Raptor is an awesome, awesome reticle. Really, really is. All right. The Leupold Mark IV HD. All right. This has got that TMR reticle. Again, second focal plane. So you're finding that dot very, very quickly. It's got the zero turret stop for those of you that are going to be dialing their holds for longer shot distances. It's got the TMR reticle in it, which is going to be very, very familiar to a lot of your military and law enforcement trained snipers out there. All right, the push button Renostat, nah, I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I invite Leupold to revisit the design of their Renostat. But other than that, a very, very great low power option for a low power variable optic. Next one is the Voodoo 1-6 by EOTech. It's got the SR3 reticle in it. First focal plane, it's got the very, very fast donut to death in it. This one's actually got a BDC in it that goes out to 600 yards. It's very, very uncluttered. Now, it also has a push button Renostat on the side, but I like this push button Renostat on off. It's got 3 buttons instead of just one on the end. Very, very pleasantly surprised with the EOTech's great, great scope. That brings me into the Vortex. Now, this is the Razor HD, the Gen 2E. All right, this scope's been out for a while. Now, all the Razors are tough scopes. I specifically asked for this scope as kind of my control scope to gauge the rest of them off of. Now, it's second focal plane. It has a very, very bright dot in it. All right. One of the best features on it, again, is the locking Renostat. And I understand a lot of you guys don't care about a locking illumination knob. I got that. But for me, that is very, very important. All right. Again, this is the scope that won a lot of the tests out at range 37 when they were doing speed drills at CQB distances. So this was the one I asked for as my control. Now, the one that Vortex set for the test is the monster, the Razor HD Gen 3 1-10x. First focal plane, very, very bright dot in the center. It's got the locking Renostat that I love. It's 10x, guys. This scope is heavy. It is heavy. No big deal if you don't mind it, if you're only pulling it out to immediately put it to work. But if this is something I'm going to put on a patrol rifle, something that I'm going to, remember, 80% of the time I'm planning on keeping it on 1x. I'm going to be doing a lot of urban movement where I'm going to want lower magnification. I probably would not go with this heavy of a scope. But if you specifically looking that you want the higher magnification, this scope performed very, very well. And that extra weight might be justified to you. All right. That brings us to the other 10x scope. This is the EOTech Voodoo 1-10x. It's got the SR4 reticle in it. Though, even though it goes up to 10x that I would look for maybe designated marksman, the SR4 reticle, probably not the best reticle for a marksman. All right, it's got all the same pros and cons as its 1-6x younger brother, including that super fast donut to death, high power, low power. You can swing this thing up and get it to work very, very fast. One of the lightest knobs to turn. They're all smooth, but this one was just a joy to spin. Now, it's the 10x magnification, and it's got that minute of angle scale. If you're an MRAD guy, they also had that available. While this was the fastest, hands down, fastest 50 to 300 meter scope, this is not the scope that I would recommend for those designated marksmen simply because of the reticle. But if you're looking targets within 300, 350, this EOTech 1 to 10, and it's a fast scope, very, very fast scope. All right. That brings us to our two Nightforce scopes. The first one being the EOTech R. It's a 1 to 8 scope, super bright dot when it's on 1x. You dial it up to 8x, that dot now becomes like a 4-sided donut. Again, very, very easy to use. I'm not happy with the non-locking Renostat on it, especially on a knob that turns that easy. But besides that, it's got a great mill grid reticle in it, great for doing holdovers, wind holds. So if you've got data for your gun, you can be very, very exact. This is for that true designated marksman out there. And then its little brother is the Nightforce NX8, again, another 1 to 8. It's got all the pros and cons of the big brother, especially the pros, but it is lighter and smaller. It's also $1,000 less than the big brother. All right, so if you're looking at Nightforce, you've got to weigh those categories, which are more important to you. Size, weight, cost gets important to a lot of people. Okay, the reticle currently in this one is for the designated marksmen, not for the CQB guys. All right. Next one is our Steiner. This is the T6XI. It's a 1 to 6 by 24. It's got the donut of death that worked great, whether it was turned on or turned off. Very similar to the EOTech reticle. It does not have a locking Renostat. The other thing I wasn't big on was that it takes a CR2450 battery, all right, where most of the rest of them take 2030s or 2023s, 2025 batteries. For the most part, the rest run the same batteries. This is the only one that I saw that ran a CR2450 battery, and I actually had a hard time finding those batteries at a lot of my small town stores. The initial battery still hasn't gone dead in it, where I've had to replace batteries in probably half of these other scopes yet. So maybe it will give you a little bit longer life. Not ran this one out yet. Last but not least, guys, is the Leupold Patrol 6HD. It is a 1 to 6 second focal plane. Both the Leupolds were second focal plane. It's got the 0 turret stop for all those that like dialing in. And one thing that I think is cool that Leupold offers is their custom dial system. And what that is you can actually send them your data for your gun, your setup, your gun with your ammo, and they'll actually laser engrave you a BDC, in other words, a turret that will be matched to your gun. I'm not really big on that on a combat gun. But it's an option for a lot of you out there. It does have the electronic reticle that will flash when the scope is not level. All right, so for a designated marksman, you understand if the gun is canted left or right, that throws off that ballistic trajectory. Instead of it going bullet rising and dropping, the bullet's going to rise and come back. No, it's going to rise and it's going to go further away if the gun is canted. Important for designated marksmen. So I understand why they put it in there in their larger scopes, but in a smaller scope, I found that flashing actually distracting. Why is it? Because normally if a reticle is flashing to me, that means it's got a low battery, and I actually found it distracting. All right, the CMR2 reticle is not for designated marksmen, it's more for a truck gun. So I'm not real big on having that flash when it's not perfectly level. The push button Renostat, again, I'm not big on it. Now, one thing I will say, guys, is this scored poorly on certain tests, but I honestly think it would have performed a lot better if I hadn't done this scope early on with the temperature variation one, with me putting it inside an actual ice block and then putting it into the oven later that same day. So I don't want you guys to say, because it's lower on others, for clarity, for example, understand, so long as you're not beating on your scopes the same way I did. Leupold is famous for having great clarity. So please don't hold that against this scope. Now, notes for all of them in general, guys, these are all great scopes. They really are. I can't say enough. So first, again, why are you using a low power variable optic? Then once you can answer that honestly yourself, then decide what categories matter more or less to you. Then you can weigh your decision on which ones are important. I want to thank all the companies that sent scopes. I burned through a lot of ammo. So more importantly, I want to thank my patrons for helping me pay for my ammo habit. If you want to become a patron, you check it out at patreon.com/tacticalrifleman. Guys, thank you for sitting through this. Thank you for the patrons that sent my coffee for me. And it's been a long video. It's been a long 6 months beating on these things. I'm gonna go back to just running my red dot on my guns. I've been running low power variable optics for over 6 months now, and I'm ready to suck start my pistol. Great stuff here. I hope you guys got something out of it. Leave your comments below. Y'all take care and shoot straight. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter so you don't miss out on anything.